Have you ever felt, even for a moment, that there is something greater trying to call to you? As if there were a silent, almost imperceptible force trying to touch your consciousness and say, wake up, there is more. Carl Jung always repeated that nothing that truly matters happens by chance. And now, as you read these words, perhaps you're beginning to realize that something within you is stirring, a kind of recognition, an ancient echo that you can't explain, feel. There are moments in life when reality ceases to be merely what we see, becomes an invitation. This is one of them. Jung stated that when a person is about to transform their life, signs appear. Small, symbolic, consistent. They appear as thoughts that won't go away, anxieties that can't be ignored, or that feeling that you are close to discovering something that could completely alter the course of your existence. And it is precisely here that everything begins. The moment your soul decides that you are ready to see what you couldn't see before. For Jung, the idea of instant wealth is not an external miracle. It is a mirror, a response from reality to the profound alignment between who you are destined to be. When the inner world awakens, the outer world reorganizes itself. But why does this reorganization seem so inaccessible to most people? Why do so many live for years, entire decades, without experiencing this sudden shift that others seem to experience almost effortlessly? Jung had a clear answer. Most people live asleep, disconnected from their own essence, lost in a labyrinth of empty routines, old fears, and inherited beliefs they never questioned. He said that the psyche tries countless times to put us back on our path, but we ignore the signs because we are convinced that life is only what we can control. However, the unconscious, that deep region that Jung dedicated his entire life to deciphering, operates with a much greater intelligence than our limited ego. It guides us even before we understand where we are going. And when we finally pay attention, what we call instant wealth, nothing more than a reflection of what already ripening. Imagine for a moment that Jung is standing before you, not as a distant teacher, but as a living presence observing your journey. He looks at you and perceives not who you have been until now, but who you can become. He sees your possibilities, your silenced potential, your talents stifled by a life too busy for you to hear them. He sees that within you lies a source of strength that has never been accessed, interrupting what, in truth, no longer makes sense. And it is precisely when you approach this boundary between who you are and who you need to be that the unknown begins to hold. That's why Jung spoke with such conviction about the self, the center of the psyche, the wise core that knows more about your life than you self. The self sends invitations, wakes you in the middle of the night with thoughts that seem to have no origin, brings together people who appear by chance. It creates coincidences that are impossible to ignore. These coincidences are more than coincidences. They are messages. But have you ever wondered how many of these messages how many opportunities has life tried to give you, but you didn't consider yourself ready? What if what's missing in your life isn't effort, but perception? What if you're so used to just surviving that you've forgotten what it's like to live with purpose? Jung said that true transformation begins when we stop looking outward, and for the first time, truly look inward. When you start asking yourself difficult questions, why am I here? Why do I keep repeating the same patterns? What is my soul trying to show me? Something powerful moves. The shadow, that psychic territory you avoid, begins to illuminate. And it is precisely in this illumination that wealth, prosperity, and clarity begin to shape. But here's the truth that few accept. For something new to enter, something old must go. There's no way to access the richness Jung describes while you insist on carrying an identity that no longer corresponds to what your life is asking for. Have you ever noticed how sometimes a simple, sudden decision changes everything? A change of attitude, a new choice, an openness to what previously seemed risky. These turning points don't happen by chance. They happen when the unconscious decides you are ready to act according to who you truly are. Perhaps you're living through this exact moment right now. Perhaps this part of your journey is the turning point that the self is carefully prepared. Not because these words have any kind of power in themselves, because you're receptive to hearing what has always been within. There's a growing tension, something like an inner calling saying, pay attention. This is for you. Do you feel it? That feeling that something important is approaching? Jung said that when you feel that calling, you must answer it. Not tomorrow, not when you have time, not when it's now. Because it is in the now that synchronicity happens. It is in the now that doors open. It is in the now that the self speaks loudest. And the question that remains is, will you listen or will you continue to postpone what could change your life? If you feel this calling, make it clear to yourself. Comment now, I accept the signal. This statement is not symbolic, it is a milestone, an internal commitment. Share the videos, subscribe to the channel, and stay with me for part 2, where Jung leads us through the next step of this revelation. Have you ever noticed that some of the biggest changes in your life began with something small, almost visible? A phrase someone said unintentionally, unexpected encounter, a sudden feeling that something was. Carl Jung insisted that none of this was accurate. For him, these small movements of fate were the way conscious tried to get your attention. Synchronicity, this phenomenon that connects the inner world to the outer world, always happens when you're faced with something you need to recognize. Perhaps without realizing it, you have been experiencing such signs long before you arrived here. Think about the times you sensed something before it happened, like when you felt you should call someone and discovered that person needed you at that exact moment, or when you avoided a path without knowing why and later learned that something bad had happened. These are episodes you might have called intuition, coincidence, or chance. But Jung saw them as messages coming from a deeper layer. He believed that your life is full of these invitations, and that ignoring them is wasting opportunities that only appear when your psyche is trying to guide you in a specific direction. There's a story many people tell, and perhaps you've experienced something similar. Someone dissatisfied with their job, feeling a growing burden, but insisting on continuing because it's what they've always. Until suddenly a succession of events begins to tighten the noose. Constant arguments, extreme exhaustion, mistakes they never made before, physical discomforts that appear out of nowhere. And then one day, an opportunity arises the person would never have dared to accept before. Unexpected invitation, an improbable chance, an unlikely encounter with someone who opens another door. Everything seems to come together as if life were pushing this person out of a cycle that no longer belongs to them. Jung said that when something needs to change, the unconscious creates such strong pressure, external life begins to reorganize itself to bring about that change. Has this ever happened to you? That feeling that something was tightening as if life itself were saying, "Can't go on like this." Many people ignore this pressure until they can no longer bear the weight. They get used to surviving. They get used to the discomfort. They get used to a destiny that wasn't consciously chosen. But Jung claimed that the soul never gets. It continues trying to reveal itself, even when you try to silence your own truth. This is where the mystery begins. Jung believed that when the soul needs to manifest it sends symbols. Sometimes the symbol is a dream so vivid that it seems more real than life itself. Other times, it is the insistent repetition of a word, an image, a number, a theme that begins to appear in different places, as if it were being placed before you on purpose. Have you ever noticed how certain subjects begin to haunt you when you are about to change? How different people start talking about the same thing, as if they were synchronized? For Jung, this phenomenon was not coincidence, it was guidance. Imagine Jung by your side as you recall situations. He observes attentively, recognizes your patterns, and realizes that these moments weren't random. They were invitations. Invitations that perhaps you refused because you were afraid to see what they truly meant. Jung always said that fear is the boundary between the life you have and the life you could have. And when fear appears, it's almost always because something new is trying to be born. Perhaps you've felt this recently. The feeling that something is changing inside you, even if nothing external seems different. A discomfort with the same routines, a lack of energy to follow old paths, a desire you can't explain, or even a series of events that begin quickly, considered coincidence. Many people describe this as if life were giving signs. Jung said that these are not signs from life, signs from yourself, coming from the depths of the psyche, trying to show that a new cycle has already begun. If you observe carefully, you will realize that synchronicity never arrives when you're stable. It arises when you're at your limit, when you're exhausted, confused, restless, when something within you no longer accepts remaining where you are. It is at this moment that the self, deepest instance of the psyche, begins to rearrange your external reality so that you awake. A person who appears out of nowhere with the exact words you needed, content that appears precisely at the moment you were about to give, an opportunity that seems too improbable to ignore. Jung said that life speaks like this through the very web that surrounds you, and perhaps you're realizing that none of this is far from your reality. Perhaps you're beginning to recognize certain moments that previously went unnoticed, a conversation that changed something within, a decision you made without understanding why. The feeling that this video, at this exact moment, didn't arrive here by chance. Jung would say that this is synchronicity manifesting it, asking you to listen. But what happens if you don't listen? The cycle repeats itself. Life continues to send similar situations, similar people, similar challenges, always with the same purpose, to awaken what is dormant. And as long as you continue to look only outward, thinking that everything is the work of fate, you will continue to miss the opportunity to understand that all of this. The real question is not, why is this happening to me? The real question is, what inside me is trying to emerge. Jung said that nothing changes until you change. And when you change, everything around you inevitably changes too. Synchronicity is simply a reflection of this inner change. Perhaps it's happening now. Perhaps this is the first time in a long time that you've truly allowed yourself to feel what's moving within you. And if that's the case, then you've already entered the second stage of this process. If you understand what this moment means, declare it to yourself. Comment now, I am waking up. Enjoy the video, subscribe to the channel, and join me for part 3. Where Jung reveals the path that opens up when we finally accept what has always been right in front of us. There are moments in life when the feeling of being on the verge of something grand is so intense that it's impossible to. It's as if reality suddenly breathes. Carl Jung said this happens when you approach what you truly are, not what you've built to survive. He believed that the unconscious gently pushes the individual toward this boundary between what they know and what they fear to know. It is in this symbolic region, this boundary between the current identity and the identity that tries to emerge, that true transformation begins. And it is here that many retreat, because they sense that they will be forced to abandon a part of themselves that no longer serves them, but still seems comfortable. Jung asserted that every growth process involves a subtle death, not physical, psychological. It is the abandonment of old behaviors, old thoughts, old justifications that kept you trapped in an outdated version of yourself. He called this a crossing, a step out of the safe place towards the unknown vastness of one's soul. It is in this territory that life begins to emit stronger signals, as if trying to hasten your decision. These signals, for most, seem confusing. But for Jung, they were clear as an arrow. When something is about to be born, everything around it reorganizes itself, including what seems to crumble. The interesting thing is that this reorganization rarely begins clearly. It arrives as discomfort, as irritation, as a void that suddenly appears in the middle of a routine that has all worked. Have you ever felt this? Have you noticed that before every important change there is a strange silence, an interval between the old and the new, where nothing makes sense and everything? Jung said that this void is not absence, it is preparation. But what exactly is being prepared? Are you ready to perceive what is trying to emerge? This is where perspectives emerge you dare to explore. Jung believed that the unconscious not only holds memories but also constructs futures. He insisted that within you there is an intelligence that works silently to organize paths, encounters, and opportunities long before you are aware of them. It is not an external mystical force, but an internal direction that reveals itself when you begin to walk. People who seem to appear out of nowhere, ideas that appear at improbable moments, invitations you didn't expect. Or this makes up the invisible architecture of the journey. But the question is, can you interpret these clues? Or do you still try to explain everything rationally, even when logic fails? Often, resistance arises precisely there. The mind tries to analyze what should be felt, tries to understand what should be experienced. And Jung said that this is the most common mistake. No one traverses their own soul with total control. The journey only begins when you recognize that you cannot predict the entire path, yet you continue. It may seem frightening, but it is precisely this movement that awakens your inner strength. It is not the absence of fear that allows you to move forward. It is the courage to continue despite it. But where does this courage come from? What inside you is asking to be heard right now? At this point, Jung introduces a profoundly transformative concept. The self is not guided by reason, but by resonance. It doesn't give you certainties, it gives you signs. A sudden feeling that this is the way. An almost inexplicable impulse to try something new. A perception that arises without warning and repeats itself until you finally decide to pay attention. And here is a little discussed truth. The more you resist these signs, the more intense the internal pressure becomes. Life begins to dismantle structures that no longer serve you. Not to punish you, but to free you from what prevents you from moving forward. That's why sometimes everything seems to go wrong at once. It's not chaos, it's alignment. It's the unconscious removing old pieces so that new possibilities can enter. Imagine Jung looking at you at this very moment, observing your recent memories, your inner tensions, your thoughts that won't be silenced. He doesn't judge you. He understands that you are on the threshold of crossing over. And it is precisely here that the unexpected begins to manifest itself more forcefully. Have you ever been at a point where everything seemed to be falling apart only for something extraordinary to emerge? As you noticed how certain losses opened paths that only gained meaning after you named the initial pain. Jung said that this is how the unconscious realigns your life, stray too far from your rightful psychological. What if that's what's happening to you right now? What if what you interpret as disorder is a journey through the shadow is not a linear process? It oscillates. There are days of absolute clarity and days of complete darkness. There are moments when you feel confident and others when you doubt even your own breath. But Jung affirmed that this movement is natural, as you are dealing with deep layers of yourself. The shadow doesn't appear to destroy you. It appears to complete you. It shows you what you tried to hide, what you avoided feeling, what you ignored for fear of destabilizing your life. But when you allow this part to be seen, something powerful changes. You become whole. And why is wholeness so important? Because it is in wholeness that your capacity resides to create a life that truly corresponds to who you are. A life that is not driven by need or survival, but by purpose. When Jung spoke of individuation, he was not describing a distant philosophical concept. He was describing the real possibility of living with authenticity, with presence, with action. And this possibility begins when you cross the threshold you have always avoided. See that door now? Can you feel that you're standing in front of it? If this part touched you deeply, declare it to yourself. Comment now, I am ready to cross over. Enjoy the video, subscribe to the channel, and move on to part 4, where Jung reveals how self begins to guide your life when you finally accept the journey. There comes a point in anyone's journey of transformation when the feeling of being guided becomes so evident that it's impossible to pretend nothing is. Jung said that when someone finally crosses the boundary of their own shadow, the self takes responsibility for guidance, not in a spectacular or dramatic way, but through an invisible order that begins to reorganize daily life in unexpected ways. Even those who try to rationalize these end up admitting that something has changed, because life begins to present patterns that simply didn't exist before. And it is precisely here that the most surprising accounts of those who have lived through this process begin. Stories that seem too improbable to be ignored. One of these stories, recounted by Jung in his lectures, told of a patient who repeatedly dreamed of an antique jewel, a golden pendant in the shape of a scarab beetle. He described the dream as unsettling, without understanding the reason for that persistent image. During a particularly intense session, he was recounting the same dream for the umpteenth time when, suddenly, there was a knock on the office window. Jung stood up, opened the window, and an insect collided directly with his hand. It was a golden scarab beetle, an extremely rare animal in that. The patient was shocked. Jung smiled slightly, and at that exact moment she had the profound insight she had been seeking for months. For Jung, this was no coincidence. It was the self symbolically manifesting what the patient needed to integrate. Her transformation began there. Not because the insect was magical, but because the symbol crossed the barrier between the unconscious, and stories like this are not uncommon. Jung collected hundreds of similar cases, improbable encounters, synchronicities so precise that they defied any casual explanation. In his notebooks, he wrote that the self possesses perfect timing, even if impossible to predict. This becomes evident when we see stories of ordinary people who have experienced equally unexpected life, like the man who had always dreamed of working with art, but settled into a manual. One day, after weeks of restlessness for no apparent reason, he found an old notebook abandoned on the sidewalk. When he opened it, he discovered that someone had left pages and pages of unfinished drawing. He felt something inexplicable, took the notebook home, and that same day, started drawing again. Months later, he got his first job as an illustrator. It's easy to call this chance, but Jung would say it was the self realigning the path he had abandoned. There are also documented cases of people who report such specific premonitions. Difficult to dismiss them as vague intuition. Jung studied a patient who used to have a precise physical sensation whenever a major change was approaching. A slight contraction in the diaphragm, as if something were being pulled from within. For years, she ignored this signal until she realized that the sensation appeared before every major life-changing vision. It was the same signal she felt before meeting her future husband, before quitting a job that was making her ill, or starting a project ended up being the fulfillment of. When Jung analyzed her case, he said something revealing. The self doesn't speak only through the mind, it speaks through the body. This explains why so many people feel physically when a change is near, even without knowing why. These surprising and improbable events do not arise merely as isolated warnings, but as part of a sequence. When someone aligns with their own psychic center, external life acquires a different rhythm. Events connect rapidly, coincidences cease to be coincidences, and patterns begin to repeat themselves until the individual understands that they are within a process larger than they. Jung believed that this increasing synchronicity is a silent confirmation that the self is taking. He described this as the hidden intelligence of a kind of movement that guides life toward a purpose that the ego alone could never. One curious fact that Jung shared is that people undergoing individuation report an increase in spontaneous creativity. Ideas arise at random moments, falling from nowhere. Many of them say they feel they are not thinking these ideas, but receiving them. Jung affirmed that this sensation is legitimate. When the conscious mind reduces its control, creative unconscious gains space to manifest itself. He observed this in dozens of artists, writers, inventors, and even entrepreneurs who, after traversing their own shadow, began to experience bursts of clarity, and imagination. It's as if the crossing releases a force that has always been present, but repressed. There are also accounts of people who, after integrating important parts of their own psyche, found opportunities that seemed absolutely impossible days before. One woman spent years trying to get a scholarship and, after a period of deep reflection, received an unexpected call from an institution she didn't even remember sending documents to. Another young man dreamed of living in another country but never had the means to do so. A stranger told him about a little-known program that covered exactly what he needed. What makes these stories so impressive is not the opportunity itself, but the fact that they appeared immediately after a significant internal change. Jung never promised that individuation would bring wealth or success in a material sense, but he asserted that it would open doors that the ego could never open on its own. This happens because when you move towards your inner truth, the external world responds accordingly. Your perception changes, your choices change, and these changes attract new possibilities. Jung said that life begins to cooperate with those who walk sincerely towards the center. He called this psychic alignment, and it is from this alignment that the unexpected turns that so many people describe arise. It's surprising to realize how much sense these improbable events make when viewed through Jung. They cease to be isolated occurrences and become expressions of the psyche itself, trying to realize itself in the world. The self guides, organizes, rearranges, and, when necessary, creates almost impossible opportunities to put the individual on the road. There's no magic in it, an order that operates beyond common rational comprehension. When you recognize this order, you begin to realize that nothing is as random as it seems. Life has intention, and this intention reveals itself more clearly when you finally accept looking at a point along the way where everything becomes more intense, as if life were compressing events to force you to see what you've always avoided. Jung said that when the soul wants to move forward, it doesn't ask permission. It begins to move the pieces of your existence in such a fast and direct way it seems impossible to keep up. It's as if the whole of reality is trying to push you to a place you don't yet recognize, but which, somehow, you feel is where you should be. And it is precisely at this moment that what Jung called psychological destiny emerges, an internal force that, when ignored, causes ruptures, and accepted, releases energy. This intensity doesn't just appear in subtle signs or curious coincidences. Often it manifests as a crisis, an unexpected rupture, a feeling of loss that seems unfair. For Jung, these losses are not punishments, but adjustments. He said that the unconscious removes what you cannot let go of on your own. It's a hard but necessary process. Imagine someone who insists on remaining in an empty relationship one day without warning, or someone who struggles to maintain a job that has already drained their energy. Suddenly, the job ends. What seems like a tragedy at first later reveals itself as Jung believed that the self acts silently, but acts with precision. Tension grows when you realize that things you considered secure are. Jung said that nothing unravels without something better. He frequently observed this in his patients, especially those close to a major leap. People reported feeling the world narrowing before the final turning point, as if they were being pushed to a limit. But it is precisely at that limit that revelation arises. That is where the new cycle begins to become visible. It's like the calm before the storm, not because of tranquility, but because of the silent strangeness that precedes. It's common at this stage for individuals to feel doubt, regret, or a desire to go back. The mind tries to reconstruct the old, tries to hold on to what no longer exists. Jung said this happens because the ego is afraid of losing control. But the truth is that control has already dissolved. What's happening now is direction. Life begins to lead you towards what is yours, even if you can't yet interpret the path. This feeling of displacement is known to many, and is usually remembered later as the beginning of the best phase of their lives. The strange thing is that at the time, everything seems too confusing to perceive. There are accounts of people who, at the height of this process, felt as if life was communicated directly with. Dreams became stronger, coincidences more frequent, signs more repetitive. One woman reported that, weeks before completely changing her life, she began seeing the same phrase in different places: buses, social media, packaging, random advertisement. The phrase was simple: now is the time. She thought it was just a coincidence until she realized she had never noticed this phrase before. Now it appeared every day, if she were being guided. This is exactly the type of experience that Jung classified as a summons from destiny, a direct invitation to walk through the door ahead. Another striking case analyzed by Jung involved a man who, for years, avoided confronting an internal conflict. He tried to maintain a stable life, felt an emptiness he couldn't explain. He began having recurring dreams of an overflowing river, always at the same point, always on the same bank. He ignored the dream, but one day he suffered a significant loss that completely changed his life. When he returned to the consulting room, Jung explained that the river symbolized his rest psychic energy, and that the external rupture was the way the unconscious found to restore the internal flow. The upheaval that seemed destructive, in fact, allowed him to find his true path. This man would later become someone deeply fulfilled, but he only managed to get there because life pulled him from where he was. These often abrupt events don't happen by chance. Jung said that when the self isn't heard, it becomes more insistent. It repeats signals, repeats patterns, repeats discomforts until you finally understand. When you perceive and accept it, everything changes rhythm. Suddenly, the pieces fall into place, opportunities arise, right people appear. What once seemed impossible becomes natural. It's as if life, now aligned with your consciousness, begins to cooperate with you. This alignment creates a sense of inevitability, as if what is happening is part of something bigger. The feeling of inevitability is one of the most intense moments in the individuation process. It's when you finally see that all the crises, all the signs, all the repetitions, purpose. It's a moment of clarity that arrives almost like a shock. Your whole life takes on a new meaning. Jung describes this moment as the encounter with your recognition of always destined, which only now you're to embrace. It is here that tension transforms into strength and fear transforms into impulse. Something within you finally aligns. For the first time, you feel that you are exactly where you should be. And when that feeling arrives, what happens next is even more surprising. Life doesn't just open doors, it creates paths that didn't exist before. People you never imagined meeting enter your life at the exact right moment. Unexpected proposals appear. Ideas that seemed distant become possible. Jung said that this is neither coincidence nor magic. A consequence of a soul that has rediscovered itself and, in doing so, activated the natural movement of everything that was dormant. Transformation ceases to be an effort and flow. And this flow is what leads you to the final stage, where complete revelation finally happens. There comes a moment when the entire journey you've traveled so far begins to align within you, as if the pieces that seemed loose finally find their proper fit. Jung said that true understanding doesn't happen when you learn something new, but when something old within you awakens. And if you've reached this point, it's because something has awakened. Not because of words, but because your soul recognized a movement that had been silently unfolding for a while. Now, for the first time, perhaps you can see that all the synchronicities, crises, signs, and internal pressures have been preparing you for this moment, the instant you embrace your own transformation. Jung believed that the individuation process is only complete when a person decides to act from their own inner truth. Intellectual understanding is not enough, nor is it enough to feel the inner force demand change. Action is necessary. He said that an idea only becomes real when it takes shape in the concrete world. That's why you're now beginning to feel a restlessness that isn't fear, but as if something inside you is saying, next step is, and it truly is yours. Because no revelation can be sustained without action. The self can open doors, but it is you who walks through them. The transformation Jung described was never, and begins with small gestures, ones laden with intention. When you choose to speak the truth you previously hid, when you refuse a path that no longer belongs to you, when you allow yourself to listen to that intuition you always push to the back of your mind. These small acts are symbols, external manifestations of the new consciousness that is born. It's like lighting a candle in a dark room. It may not illuminate everything immediately, but completely changes the way you move within it. Perhaps you've already felt this in the last few days, weeks, or even hours. A different perception of old situations, unexpected clarity about behaviors you maintained out of habit. A new feeling that you can go beyond what you previously believed. These perceptions are signs that your psyche has already done part of the work. The other part is your responsibility. Jung said that life doesn't deliver ready-made, it delivers invitations. And when you accept the invitation, the journey transforms. But how to apply this in practice? How to transform such an internal process into something tangible? Jung's answer was simple and profound at the same time. Begin with what your soul is asking. Perhaps it's courage. Perhaps it's silence. Perhaps it's change. Perhaps it's rest. Perhaps it's the decision you've been putting off for months. Self speaks through this feeling of inner urgency. This is the first practical application. Listen to what you feel before listening to what the world says. Self doesn't shout. Listening now, it's because the second point that Jung considered essential was integration. He said that there is no progress without honesty. This means acknowledging your fears without letting them control you, embracing your sadness without turning it into identity, allowing your anger without making it. When you integrate your emotions, they cease to be walls and signs. The shadow loses its power when it ceases to be hidden. And when you finally look at it, you realize that it didn't want to destroy you. It wanted to liberate you. The practice begins with small daily choices. Choosing what brings you closer to who you want to be, not what the world expects you to be. Choosing what expands, not what contracts. Choosing what illuminates, not what extinguishes. These choices, repeated over time, build a new reality. A life aligned with your most authentic center. A life that responds to your inner movements like a perfect echo. There's a rarely quoted passage from Jung where he says, "The external journey is a reflection of the inner journey." This means that when applying this process in practice, you don't need to wait for grand signs. Change begins in how you position yourself in the world. It begins when you decide not to repeat old patterns, when you choose to say no where you previously said yes, when you allow yourself to desire something greater, when you stop justifying your own stagnation. These simple gestures shape the ground for the self to manifest more clearly. And there's also something few mention. Jung said that true transformation is silent. It doesn't happen in dramatic explosions, but in internal alignments that suddenly make the next step obvious. You realize it's no longer possible to go back to a life that doesn't correspond to who you are. That point is irreversible. And when it arrives, the only possible direction, not because you need to prove something, but because you no longer fit into the old version of yourself. The tension you felt throughout the process wasn't an obstacle, but a warning. The crisis you faced wasn't a mistake, but a beginning. The signs that appeared weren't trying to confuse you, but the feeling of something about to happen wasn't anxiety, it was preparation. All these elements formed the invisible structure, transformation. And now you're at the moment when this structure becomes clear. Everything that seemed disconnected makes sense. Everything that seemed random gains. Everything that seemed difficult reveals the reason it happened. Jung said that when a person finds their own path, the whole world rearranges itself to support them. You can feel this starting now. It's not a vague promise. It's a real inner move, a vibration that changes your posture, your perception, your disposition. You are facing a moment that is not only emotional, but psychic. Profound transition that once recognized transforms everything. And looking ahead, perhaps you'll realize you're no longer asking what you should do. You're asking who you want to be. That's the central question of the individuation process. Not the role you play, not the obligations you carry, not the expectations others have tried to impose on you, but who you finally allow yourself. The answer to this question doesn't appear immediately, but it begins to emerge in the spaces you create when you choose to walk consciously. From this point on, your journey ceases to be about understanding and becomes about living. This is where revelation transforms into practice, where where awakening becomes movement. And little by little, you realize that there is no end point. There is continuity. There is deepening. There is expansion. Everything that has aligned within you now begins inside. And when that happens, life in a subtle yet powerful way spawns.